Hello and welcome to the Solink podcast. I'm delighted to be here with Peter Evans from McFadyen Digital, who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. I'm Will Rundle, co-founder of Solink, which is the UK's premier AI-powered platform for trading construction materials. Our materials exchange platform connects construction suppliers with buyers, facilitating efficient material reuse and distribution. The Solink digital platform enables CO2 emission reduction, waste minimisation, circular economy promotion and cost saving. My esteemed guest, Peter Evans, is Chief Strategy Officer at McFadyen Digital. He is a platform marketplace and circular economy specialist. In addition, he is co-chair of MIT Platform Strategy Summit and on the Forbes Business Council. Before McFadyen Digital, Peter was at KPMG. He was a partner in the Innovation and Business Solution Group, responsible for market and emerging technology sensing, innovation portfolio management, and business development. Suffice to say, Peter knows what he's talking about on all things digital platforms. So welcome, Peter.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Not at all. So let's open the floor up. So why digital platforms? What first got you interested in digital platforms?
Well, it was actually quite a while ago. It's been more than a decade. And at the time, I was leading strategy for GE's energy business and was tasked with finding new ways to grow the business and understand trends. And that was the time when, the internet had been pretty much established, and then the iPhone came in. And so there was just a lot of kind of thinking about how to harness these technologies, and a new business model emerged from that, which they call platform business models. And they're very powerful, right? We've seen tremendous scale. They've become embedded in our economies. You see platforms operating in wide range from retail to B2B applications. And so they're really interesting. They're challenging to launch and grow and scale, but offer tremendous benefits in terms of reducing transaction costs, better matching between parties, and a bunch of value-added services that can be embedded in platforms. So they offer lots of interesting opportunities. And I guess our conversation today will be, kind of what's the next phase of the platform economy?
Absolutely. Where do you see it going, Peter?
Yeah, so most of the platforms we know and use, like Amazon, eBay, or Booking.com is another one in the transportation sector. Or, when you're catching a ride, you may take an Uber or Lyft, and then Airbnb and hospitality. But you can even, if you have a dog and you're taking a vacation and you need somebody to help walk your dog, there's a platform for that called Rover. You can find a dog walker. So I tell you, there are platforms all over the place. But they have largely been focused on what we call the linear economy, i.e., taking inputs, processing them, getting them to consumers, and having those consumers use them. And then they end up as waste. And so the question is can platforms be applied to promote the circular economy, which is focused on the second user, reuse, relife, refurbishment, repair, and then potentially recycling. And indeed, when you dig into this space, you find there's actually quite a number of circular marketplaces out there. So then the question becomes, what's the difference between a linear marketplace and a circular marketplace?
So looking at circular marketplaces, and there are, when we dig into this, we know there's quite a few out there. Has there any good examples that you can think of where the company's truly nailed the ethos of a circular marketplace across any industry?
So I think about it as a spectrum. You have what you would call very low value and high volume products or materials, things like plastics. Those tend to be really hard to create a marketplace on purely commercial terms. Of course, governments can come in and provide some kind of incentive, subsidy, or mandate that requires it. But that's at the far end of the spectrum of really tough areas where you have low value. On the other end of the spectrum, you have extremely well-established circular marketplaces. Those would be things like used cars. They're used car markets all over the world, North America, Europe, Asia. In fact, there's been a boom recently as the Chinese economy has produced a middle class. That middle class now is buying lots of cars, and those cars are resold into secondary markets. So those are well-established commercial marketplaces. I think the interesting space now is sort of the in-between these two spectrums, where you're getting kind of more and more entrepreneurs and companies thinking about how do you create marketplaces in these new spaces. So electronics is a great example. So you're seeing quite a number of circular marketplaces emerge to transact in laptops and phones. And in fact, there are about 330 million phones now transacted in secondary markets. So it's a great example of a circular marketplace in the electronic space. But there are other spaces as well. You mentioned things like construction. You have scrap steel, for example, that come from decommissioned buildings. And so there are secondary markets in that space that are interesting, and they're all becoming digitized. It's not like no one's ever used products before, but what the innovation is best practices and best technology for driving digitization of reuse is really coming to bear. And that's pretty exciting because there are ways of really substantially reducing the transaction costs and improving matching to make this easier, right? Some of the reason that circular didn't happen in the past, it was hard. But as these technologies make it reduce the friction and make it more accessible and open up new opportunities for second buyers and third buyers and fourth buyers of products, it turns out that on average, phones are resold 4 times. You wouldn't think about that, but it's how the economy works, and it's not necessarily in the same country. Some of these phones, the U.S. now is a large exporter of phones, and these are bought in Latin America and other places around the world.
It's so interesting to see these new markets emerging from these platforms.
Yeah. So going back to kind of platform principles, there's some areas where platforms perform really well and are relatively easy now to establish. And those are things where you have a discrete product and you can put a kind of a fixed price associated with that. That's pretty standard. Those marketplaces exist. When it becomes a little bit more challenging, for example, is when you do services. Because services are less well defined. Sometimes you have to negotiate the scope of the services, and you're finding gig economy platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, platforms like this, and they're very large. I mean, they do billions of dollars in transactions. And so then you have digital products like software. So AWS has a marketplace. Obviously, the Apple App Store is another one. And so these digital products. So these are areas that you see platforms well established. Now, when you get into the construction area, that's interesting. Probably there was some kind of buying and selling happening, but it hadn't been done as efficiently as it could be done. I guess one of the questions I have back to you would be, given that aggregate or earth is, how do you specify it? Is it by volume? Is it by tons? How do you post that as availability? And I would imagine some of it's contaminated. So how do you register the kind of the quality of the products? And so these are attributes that are necessary in order for the two parties to understand what are you selling and what are you buying. And once those can be done, that can be put up on a website so that you can do the matching function. But I'm interested to hear a little bit more about how do you deal with the amorphous nature of dirt or aggregate, and how do you specify that so the buyer knows what's available?
It's a great question and a highly nuanced question. Considering that it's most people think of, let's take soil as an example. Most people think soil, and that's largely it.
Soil is soil, right?
Exactly. And you speak to the an average person in the street, and they say, yeah, so it's what things grow out of. However, in our world, there is so many variables to the product or to the material. So, in terms of how we regulate, we ourselves as Solink don't regulate and don't check material. Um, what we rely on is users abiding by the standards set within industry, and there's the waste code of conduct, for example, which sets out the parameters in which the industry has to work in. So, what we do as a platform is we gather the information, we present it in a legible way, and then the other user is then able to make an informed decision as to what they're looking at, and they can understand the reports, and it's all we're facilitating the information sharing and the matchmaking rather than auditing the material itself.
So we find that many platforms, in order to facilitate that matching, need to create taxonomies, right? Do you have a taxonomy for aggregate and soil?
We do, and cement and asphalt as well. So we're
Okay.
broader than the horizon, but yes, we do across the breadth of the variables, which there are a lot.
Right. So, this is another value that a platform brings is that they can invest in the architecture in order for parties to understand what they're buying and selling. And that creates trust. It creates better information. And this is what attracts parties to a platform. So, great platforms invest heavily in these taxonomies and information so that the buyers know that if they come to that platform, they're likely to get the information they need, which attracts sellers. And the more sellers there are, that attracts more buyers. So you get this, what they call network effects that power these. And so one of the things I'm super excited about is how do we get network effects and that flywheel effect in the circular economy? Because that's the way you scale it. We all know that if you read things like the Circularity Gap Report, a very small percentage of products and material that's extracted from the earth is actually reused. And actually, we're sliding backwards. It used to be some estimated to be 9%. Now it's down to 7%. So there needs to be a lot more effort into how you do this. And so I think these platforms and marketplaces offer a tremendous opportunity. So just in terms of scale, I have a question for you, which is in the UK on an average year, how many million tons of material is moved by truck?
Yeah, I mean, if I contextualize it into so we generally look at eight wheelers as what the trucks that we see out on the roads, and we can see up to just the stat is just shy of 21 million
Wow.
movements of
Okay. So
trucks.
that
It's huge.
so when I hear that kind of number, I'm like, platform marketplace makes a ton of sense because platforms and marketplaces like fragmented markets that they can come in and aggregate the supply side and aggregate the demand side. And if there are more transactions, the more opportunity there is for exchange of value. And so when you give me a number of 21 million, I think the prospects are very strong for a successful marketplace to emerge in the UK for better matching supply and demand of these construction materials.
I couldn't agree more. And I think you're going back to one of your points you made a moment ago about the fragmented market. And I think especially the sector that we're targeting with the heavy materials side of the market, it's so fragmented. There's lots of major players, but there's lots of smaller independents, and there's no one hub for sharing that information. There's just there's so much low hanging fruit that the industry can benefit from, and be it commercially or be it sustainable gains, operational gains. That there's just so much, and also the data that's been missed, and allowing us to make informed, sensible decisions with information that should just be collected by a standard course. So yeah, it's super interesting to see. So I'm going to pivot and ask you a question.
Sure.
What would you say are the core four principles that make a platform effective?
Yeah, I think we've already touched on some of them. One is the ability to aggregate supply and demand. And so fragmented markets are a great place to look for platform opportunities. The other is the ability to create network effects where the more participants that join, the more value is created, which attracts more participants, which creates more value. And then so you get a positive reinforcing cycle. This does not exist in every market. So there are some markets in which adding more participants doesn't add more value. It actually detracts. For example, if you get too much congestion, actually, it doesn't add value. It actually detracts value. And so you're looking for markets in which you can get that flywheel effect going. And then the other is, are there a lot of friction in the existing system that digitizing and providing this matching functions and the value added, like the taxonomies that we just talked about, create value, which reduce friction and reduce the transaction costs. And so then the new system works better than the old system, which creates people to come. And then you get kind of these positive dynamics in which people want to transact on the platform. The final one is trust, risk, and safety. Doing transactions in the open economy can be kind of scary. Like, who am I buying that from? And is it a reputable player in the market or not? And so the platform can help vet participants and ensure that good participants or with good reputations are participating. And so that also creates another motivation to use the platform versus trying to sort it out on your own with potentially sketchy players. So that's another core value proposition that platforms provide. So when you take all of these elements together, it becomes, and this is why platforms have become very powerful business models, and you see them growing in all sorts of areas of the economy. And it's kind of exciting to see, you pioneer a platform like this in the UK, because once you get it established there, I can imagine lots of other countries need similar types of activity, architecture, infrastructure. Almost the platform becomes infrastructure for the industry. Digital,
Absolutely.
of course, but it's infrastructure.
That's very much the way we see it as well. If we're looking at this as a service for the industry, and it's a replicable service that isn't just going to be beholden to the UK. It will be able to be rolled out and used in other countries. Um, so that actually does lead me on to the thought of data. I know we have touched on it slightly, but if we can really go into it a little bit more, because this is something that we're when we started out on our journey, we were super focused on the physical process of linking people, because that was our
Okay.
pain point as a contractor. We physically had issues where we were trying to link sites to make it more effective. As we've gone through the process, we've started to understand the value of the data that we're collecting. And when I say I'm not talking about financial value, I'm talking about the influential value of how that can be applied and better different processes,
Yeah.
systems, and outcomes. So yeah, if you'd be able to expand on that, that'd be amazing.
Well, information is actually critical. If you think about Airbnb, Airbnb is an information system. It's providing information about where an accommodation is to a party looking for an accommodation. They provide the maps so you can see where it is relative to the conference you're attending, or if you're a tourist in the sites that you want to go see. So location becomes very valuable. All of this is information. What they're doing is providing an information service to match the parties. So that's a core element, and you need a lot of data to provide that information. And ultimately what you're trying to do is improve decision making, right? It's decision making on both sides of the market. And so the platform sponsor, the platform owner, like yourself, really need to create the information for the parties to make good decisions. And once you do that, you get a lot of value because again, you're comparing it to the open market or the existing system with enriched information. You can just make a much better set of transactions, and that's what parties are looking for. Is how do I get the best deal at the
Yep.
time I want? It's not just the best deal. The best deal may be 6 months from now, but that doesn't do me any good because I've got a construction site right now that I need to dispose of this material. So timing matters, and spending the time to find where this goes. And it can save a lot of money because the alternative is maybe landfilling it, which is going to cost you a lot. So it's better to find a buyer that can actually productively use it than to call a disposal company. So information becomes critical in making those decisions. And so the more information, but it has to be processed in a way. People don't want just a data dump, right? They want the information they need in the form that they need, as simple as possible. And that takes a lot of work, actually, to configure information in a way that's accessible and quickly understandable so that they can make the right decisions.
Absolutely. I think our CTO would echo your sentiment on that entirely. I think he spent a lot of hours running through the best way to organize our data for it to be relative when it's called upon.
So the data has to be actionable, right? Just
Yeah.
having data, and I think a lot of companies got excited when big data came in and they hired a bunch of data analysts, and those data analysts didn't understand the business purpose. They were just off analyzing it. And so it's connecting it to how business decisions are actually made by the parties, and then getting that information down to the parties that actually need that information. If it's too abstract or it's in the wrong place, then it isn't actually helping with business outcomes.
Completely agreed. Completely
Yeah.
agreed.
And I tell you, if you compared the website of Airbnb or the world class platforms today to 10 years ago, it's night and day. They relentlessly, constantly are working to improve how information is displayed on their platforms. And you may recall, it wasn't that long ago before you had a static page and then you had to click to the next page. Scrolling wasn't how the internet initially displayed information, but we've evolved and they've realized that scrolling is just how people can consume information faster. So anyway, you live and learn, I guess, and platforms, and hopefully your platform is going to look a lot different in 3 years from now as today, as you learn more and you scale and you get kind of a larger share of that 21 million trucks out there that are moving dirt daily, and you can make better decisions. And in fact, it'd be very interesting to keep a record of kind of the process today, just to show the productivity gains that are going to happen and the environmental gains that will happen with better decisions about where this material ends up. So I have a question for you because, again, platforms can add a lot of value in the base things I've been talking about, which is improving the transactions. But there's another whole layer of added services that you can bring to play. So I would imagine insurance is an issue when you're moving heavy materials from one site to another site. And you may not have this now, but are you thinking about additional services that you can add to the platform to enrich it and make it more valuable? There's actually obviously tax issues, there's insurance, there's logistics management, understanding kind of what's available and how to optimize routing. I would imagine some of this material can't go on certain roads, and may actually require certain certified drivers. So only certain drivers can move this material if it's more hazardous and things of that nature. So I'm just kind of curious, thinking through sort of how you evolve the platform and add additional services to it.
Sure, that's it's a great question. I think going back to when we first started building our MVP, which is out in the market now, we had the classic scenario that we wanted to keep adding features and more functionality, and all the advice was rein it back, pare it back, bring it back to the
Okay.
core model, and then build off that. So we launched in April 2024. We spent 2 months gathering feedback and ideas from the market, the users, what they wanted to see and what features would be functional. So we're currently in the process of building out some of those additional functions now. So
Okay.
very much on point with what you're saying. We're building an area where service partners, so the hauliers, the material suppliers, the facilities that can accept material and recycle material, restoration sites, and complementary services like geotechnical testing, for example. The
Interesting.
market wanted to be able to present themselves on our platform to our users. So we're enabling that as a key function with a lot of different functionality around it and helpful tools. We're also enabling what we call our enterprise zone, which is, again, it came at request of some of the larger contractors in the UK, whereby they wanted to map their own materials, their own resources on their own internal environment. And then if they couldn't use it between their own projects, they can push it out to the open market platform where the open market can answer the call to action.
You
Again,
called that you called that the enterprise zone?
correct.
Interesting. So can you elaborate a little bit more? That's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, so the enterprise zone is specifically for a contract, an organization who wants to map their either one
Oh,
project if they want to do it on an individual project basis, or you can map multiple projects, and then you can go into the granularity of each project, and you can look at stockpiles, what's in that stockpile, what's the volume, what's the type of material, the classification, and then you can look at it and think, well, I need to move that in December. Is there
mhm.
any of my other sites that this links up with, and whether you can intra-move it in the company, or if you can't, then you can push it out to market or push it to the supply chain that you've brought with you onto the platform. We're also using it as a tool to be able to manage future requirements. So with the information that we're gathering, it will be effectively enabled to allow tender pricing. So we'll be able to see index prices, geographical needs. So if there's a major requirement of a certain type of material in a certain location,
Right, right.
we
Well, so there's a great example of the platform providing unique information to help with decision making, right? You're
absolutely.
almost creating the forward view of where demand and supply is going to be, or at least supply. And you actually, that's interesting because it may change when a project is launched. If you knew a certain material that was very important for reducing the cost of the construction of your site is going to be available at that time, you may actually accelerate your project in order to capture that lower cost material than waiting and then facing a much higher cost. So this could have broader implications for construction sort of scheduling and things, now that I think about what you're saying.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we're having we have great dialogue with a lot of the material producers in the UK, and some of them are international companies, and they're excited by the prospect of an unbiased data set that
Okay.
can affect that change rather than their own research, which has a bias to their own
Yeah.
company's feedback, and then it will enable those foresight data driven questions to be asked of the market. And exactly as you say, it may help with bringing projects forward, pushing projects back, and like
Exactly.
programming. So that is so important.
No, that's super interesting. I hadn't actually thought through that implication, but as you were speaking, I was like, okay, this could have more profound implications. And then that means that the parties that are not on the platform are going to be at a disadvantage, right?
Correct.
So this creates competitive advantage issues, and the parties that participate in the platform are going to get access to information that wouldn't be available as readily in the general economy. And so this is another feature of platforms that is very attractive and powerful, right? And why you're going to attract it becomes another part of the flywheel of why participants will want to join your marketplace.
Absolutely. That's certainly the dream for us, that we're adding value to everybody, every company, every user that comes to the platform. We're adding value, and there's a value proposition. Whether you're just using the free to use open marketplace, there's a lot of informative data that can be benefited from that. So it's not just the paid for bits. It's the amalgamation of all the data from the users.
Now, there's obviously a regulatory component. Do you also provide kind of paper trail data? Because some companies find it very valuable if they participate on a marketplace. That marketplace will aggregate all of their transactions and provide a one-stop place for them to collect the report that they need to then submit to a regulator. Are you thinking about kind of reporting features? You mentioned features that would help companies better able to meet their compliance requirements.
Absolutely. So in our revision 2.0, which will be launched in August, all being well, there will be a reporting function. So different key metrics that companies have. Some may be how much waste has been sent off site, and I need to understand my statistics for that. We'll be able to, our users will be able to draw down on the information that is used from the platform. We are currently integrating AI into this part of the process. So we're building and built a system whereby you'll be able to ask AI pertinent questions about your own data in our system, and it'll be able to give you accurate feedback based on your own data gathered. So super useful that if you're a sustainability director for a large company and you want to understand across all of your 250 projects how much waste has been created, and specifically in that waste, how much of it could have been diverted or was potentially reusable. So we can really start to get into the information there.
Interesting. So help me with the future outlook for construction in the UK. Is that 21 million trucks going to be flat to declining, or are you going to see that grow to 30 million, for example, by 2028 or 2030?
I mean, all projections are showing that there's going to be growth, huge growth. I think when we were talking the other day, we were talking about the statistics of every year, and you're probably better placed to answer this than me. But a New York City is built every year across the globe.
Well, that's globally for sure. Yeah, it's phenomenal, the amount of construction that's taking place globally. You know, we're moving from 8 billion to 9 billion population globally. So, you know, another billion people adds a lot of infrastructure needs to the global economy. And so there's lots of earth being moved around.
Absolutely. And in terms of whether I think that's going to flatline, the material needs to be moved. It's whether it's coming out of the ground and out of a traditional quarry, primary products, or whether it's going to be a recycled product. The supply and demand will still be there. It's just where that's coming from, and that's the bit that's something that can change. So yeah, I think to answer your question, there is definitely going to be a growth in the market, but from different areas.
Very good. Well, great. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation today, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm super excited about your platform. It's a unique area, but one where there's clearly tremendous demand and meets a lot of the core principles of platforms. So I think that it's all about execution, I think.
Absolutely. It's been fantastic talking today, Peter. Really appreciate it, and appreciate all your support that you've shown SoulLink throughout its short tenure in this space. And hope there'll be more interactions to come. Great to have a recap in 6 months' time and see what's changed and talk about learnings.
Sounds great. Love to do it.
Fantastic.